Assalamu alaikum, it's 8:30 and we're live from the studios of British Muslim TV with this week's edition of Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. We're broadcasting on Sky Channel 752 and across social media, British Muslim TV. Wherever you are joining us, a very warm welcome. We want you to comment on the stories we're covering tonight. Call us now on 01924 231 083, or you can message us on the WhatsApp number, which is on the screen now. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, post your comments and we'll share some of them already. We will shortly be talking to COVID data expert Tim White about the UK Red List announcements, which we expect possibly tomorrow. We'll keep an eye on that. And then we'll joined by Shahid Mohammed Sardar, who will be talking to us about his work about dementia and the BAME communities. And we finish off in Hertfordshire talking to the author, award-winning author, Yasmin Rahman, about her career and her latest book. So that's what you're looking forward to. But obviously, for many of us, big day in Westminster and in Downing Street as Boris Johnson has carried out his second reshuffle of his cabinet. And the goings, he's been pretty busy, and just in the last few moments has tweeted, now it's time to get on with the work. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, stays in his post, as does Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, and Sajid Javid, who was recently appointed to replace Matt Hancock. He also stays in his post as Health and Social Care Secretary. Liz Truss, who was the International Trade Secretary, has moved to the Foreign Office to become the new Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Secretary. She takes up that post immediately. Stephen Barclay, you may remember him as the Brexit Secretary in Theresa May's government. He has left the Treasury and has become the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, which means he is a Cabinet Office Minister. Lord David Frost stays as the Brexit Minister. Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who was the former International Development Secretary, who lost a job when the department merged with the Foreign Office, she becomes the new International Trade Secretary, replacing Liz Truss. Nadeem Zahawi, the Vaccine Minister, who's had a pretty good run in terms of delivering the vaccine for COVID. He's been appointed as the new Education Secretary. That was after Gavin Williamson was sacked by the Prime Minister. Nadine Dorries, who is the former Minister of State at the Health Department, she's the new Culture Secretary. Kwasi Kwarteng stays as the Business Secretary. Michael Gove, who was a Cabinet Office Minister, moves to Housing, Communities and Local Government with primary responsibility for levelling up and the union. And Dominic Raab, as I said, becomes the Justice Secretary, Lord Chancellor and the Deputy Prime Minister. The first time the UK has had a Deputy Prime Minister since 2015. And then pretty much all the other ministers are staying in place. Oliver Dowden becomes the new party co-chair. Alok Sharma, who is the COP26 president, remains in that role. Nigel Adams becomes minister without a portfolio in a cabinet. He leaves the Foreign Office. Simon Clarke becomes the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. And the other ministers like Jacob Rees-Mogg stay in post, as does Mark Spencer. The Prime Minister and number 10 Downing Street have just announced in the last few moments that the US President Joe Biden, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Boris Johnson will do an on-camera address at 10 o'clock British summer time, which would be 5 o'clock in Washington, D.C. A spokesman for the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has said the three leaders will be making a strategic national security announcement. There's no further details on that, what that strategic national security announcement is, but that strategic national security announcement expected at 10 o'clock. Joe Biden, Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison and Boris Johnson will be leading that, obviously, virtually from here in the UK. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on the reshuffle as well. And we want to hear from you tonight. You can call us on 01924 231 083. Your messages on British Muslim TV across social media. Alternatively, you can send us a WhatsApp message. The number is on your screen. Now, the questions we're considering tonight. What now for Pakistan and the Red List? Question 2, how can we increase support for BAME communities suffering from dementia? And how can Afghanistan be held to account for human rights abuses? Please share your thoughts on 01924 231 083. Your messages on WhatsApp or post on social media, and we'll read some of them out throughout the programme. Lots of you getting in touch already on WhatsApp for questions for our first guest. Let's get to our first topic. The UK Red List has been reviewed. An announcement will be made tomorrow, we are told, While the traffic light system of red, amber and green will be changed from the 1st of October, the expensive PCR test for double jab holiday makers will also be scrapped, according to government sources and various newspapers. Now, with a thriving population of overseas Pakistanis in the UK, there's been a huge impact on families when Pakistan was added to the red list in April. Months later, there are reports unconfirmed that Pakistan could be taken off the red list tomorrow, but the conversation today is that that might not happen. Tim White is a data expert on COVID. He's usually the first person many journalists go to find out the latest on COVID, the review list, the vaccination rates, and I'm pleased to say Tim White is live on British Muslim TV tonight from the Northwest. Tim, a very warm welcome to the programme.
Excited to be here, and first of all, my thoughts are with anyone who's had hardship because of the red list, and particularly the families who are still separated to this day. We really do feel for you, and hopefully we might get some traction on that in the near future.
Yeah, that's true. Tell me, how are you coping during this pandemic? You seem very, very busy, whether you're on Sky News, Independent, wherever you look, you seem to be very, very busy. How are you coping, yourself and the family?
Well, first of all, I wasn't at all busy during lockdown. So we're talking the first lockdown. And I really got into this because I was appalled at the way that many journalists, well-known journalists, national broadcasters, small broadcasters, newspapers, were misreporting and not able to understand the data correctly. So I just started posting a few things on Twitter, and it snowballed. And whilst I wasn't strictly furloughed, but we had no work coming in, it was okay. But then it's become more difficult as this has snowballed, and it's taking up a lot of my time. And I'm still trying to run a company myself. And whilst I enjoy it, and it's really nice to be able to help people and get some fantastic messages back, it is a struggle trying to keep on top of not just British data, Pakistan data, but throughout the world. And messages I get now, Mohammed, it's incredible. And obviously, understandably, sometimes angry messages, but mainly people just desperate for information and confirmation. Of course, I'm not the government. I'm completely independent.
Yeah.
All I can do is try to analyse the data and give my best guess of the way things are heading.
And that's the thing that really concerns me. I mean, I know because I've been involved in having those conversations with press officers from various government departments. We are just the messengers, aren't we, Tim? You and me and all the other journalists who are trying to find out this information and get it out there. And sometimes people do lash out at you. I've seen that on Twitter. It can be some difficult, can't it?
Yeah, you have to brush it off. I think you'll have found that as well. You always get criticism. There's always someone, you don't know whether it's genuine, whether it's even some jealousy, or just mainly, I think in this situation, for me, Mohammed, it's been people just really so frustrated at the decision, and occasionally they take it out on me. In Pakistan's case, which we're talking about particularly this evening, and which, of course, most people watching will be interested in, it's been a lot of people angry that India was taken off the red list and Pakistan wasn't. Now, I've tried to point out that the data more or less support India in the position that they are now. You could argue that they should have certainly been added when Pakistan was added and Bangladesh. But should they have come off when you could have made an argument for that. Pakistan is still borderline. It's still having a higher rate of infection. It was still doing fewer tests, but that's increasing now. And indeed, the better news, particularly today, actually, was that the positive test rate in Pakistan has gone under 5%. So there have been a lot of happy people writing to me on Twitter, but also now saying, well, it has to come off red. It's not quite that straightforward, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, now, for those of people around the world watching this now who do not know the way in which the British government is making these decisions on the red list and amber and green, can you just tell us how is that structured? How does that information gather before a decision is made by the Secretary of State and government?
So the Transport Secretary is given information by a specialist committee, the Joint Biosecurity Chiefs, really. Just their job is to a collection of scientists, supposedly data analysts, collecting the data from around the world, seeing trends, judging risks. Particularly, I think, as has been more prevalent recently, is the risk about how many variants there may be and how much of a threat they may be to the UK population. So they'll consider all this. I think they probably have a meeting over the weekend, I would imagine, at the latest Monday, and then pass their recommendations for any changes to the traffic light system to the government, and particularly the Transport Secretary. I would imagine that's discussed at cabinet level, and then after that, the decisions are made public, usually on a Thursday, no set time, sometimes on a Wednesday. How strictly the UK government follows the advice it's given by its Joint Biosecurity Committee, we simply don't know. Unfortunately, the government refuses to be transparent on this. And there was even a court case brought by Manchester Airports Group, Ryanair, and a few others as well, to try and make this whole process more transparent, so that passengers knew exactly what was happening, travel businesses knew what was happening, and also countries knew what was happening. And it just didn't happen. And the government defended that court case and actually won it and maintained the right to privacy and secrecy about its decisions and how it comes to the decisions about the amber, red and green list traffic light system. However, that is almost certain to change very shortly, in that there will no longer be green and amber, we think, from the start of October. There was always going to be what they call a checkpoint. And so,
sorry, Tim, we're going to talk about that in the second part of the interview, but let's just go back to the data. You share the data, you analyze it, you put it out there. What's the reasoning behind that, and what have you learnt about the data from around the world?
It's a very good question. Sometimes it would appear that preventative measures don't have the effect that you would imagine. Eventually they do, but sometimes it's very late. I've been enlightened by a few scientists as well. I'm just analysing the data, but it was pointed out to me, for instance, one survey, one study that was done that was very in-depth and showed that having a mask mandate, i.e. forcing people to wear masks, doesn't actually have a great effect on transmission and figures.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Stay there. We're going to take a very quick short break and we'll continue the conversation with our special guest, Tim White. But as you may be just tuning in now, we're talking and reflecting about this announcement, which based on past precedent, we expect it might come tomorrow evening, around 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, from the Transport Secretary, who hasn't been moved in the reshuffle. He's staying in his job. So it'll be Grant Shapps who will tweet that out. And then there's a wider discussion around what is going to happen with the announcement towards the 1st of October. We'll talk to Tim about that. We'll take some of your calls as well. Don't go anywhere. See you shortly. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, here on British Muslim TV. We hope you're finding our exclusive interview with Tim White beneficial.
Masking up does work. It does cut the numbers of infections and transmissions. However, a number of people will refuse to obey the orders, and they're the ones likely to not be wearing it anyway before or after any mask mandate. Whereas one might say the most sensible people or the most cautious people are still likely to be wearing a mask, even though it's not compulsory in dangerous situations. And that's the advice the UK government is giving now. If you're in a crowded indoor space, particularly if you don't feel safe, surrounded by too many people, then wear a mask. So that's one of the things that I've been learning. I try to point out to people that, don't just look at cases, because if you don't test much, you're not going to get many cases. So we saw Mexico go on the red list when one would have thought its infection rate wasn't particularly high, but the testing rate was so low, it really, really was high. The UK always seems to have higher cases, and that's something often levelled at me by people who are angry, saying, but the UK rate's this high, how can they stop us travelling, or how can they stop us coming there? And one of the simple answers is the UK does about the most testing per head of population in the world, and has done consistently. Yeah. And it's way above the levels of the subcontinent, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. And so sometimes the figures can be easily distorted when you see infection rates much, much higher in the UK. Yeah, they are higher at the moment. They are coming down quite rapidly.
They are. I'm just going to ask you one quick question. We've got about 2 minutes before our break. We know that the UK government delayed for about 3 weeks to put India in the red list when the Delta variant was spreading across India with devastating consequences. Do you think that was a mistake? They waited 3 weeks and then the Delta variant spread in this country where 99% of the positive cases are to do with the Delta?
Absolutely, I do, 100%. And I can only link it to the fact that Boris Johnson was trying to get a trade deal and was planning to go there. I think most data experts and most independent people would acknowledge that as fact. India was as badly hit as Pakistan was at the time. There shouldn't have been differentiation between the two, in my personal opinion. Delta would have arrived here anyway, obviously. So how much damage was actually done because of that decision? Probably a little bit, and probably we weren't as prepared as we should have been, and it certainly disrupted plans, but it would have come and it would have taken over, as it has done in other countries, as we're even seeing in Australia now with some of the strictest COVID protocols seen anywhere in the world.
Tim, let's talk about Pakistan. We know that the Prime Minister of Pakistan's Special Advisor on Health, Dr. Faisal Sultan, met with Department of Health officials last week. They said it was very positive from both sides. And we know that the former Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, said he wanted to see Pakistan out of the red list this week. What's your take on the data coming out from Pakistan at the moment?
Well, it's much better than it has been, which is obviously a good sign. There are genuine falling cases. The testing rate's got a little bit better as well. So the positivity rate, that's the number of positives per case that are tests that are done, is falling. And that's a key figure. If anything, that's probably more important than the number of cases. So that's just dipped below 5% today for the first time in a long time, which is excellent news. The other criteria that are taken into account for the system as it currently is are things like vaccination rate, which Pakistan is still trailing with, unfortunately, but making some strides forward. And yes, cases themselves, but also another important factor that's going to become a whole lot more important, we'll discuss that in a moment, I'm sure, Mohammed, is how much genomic sequencing is done. Now, it might sound very complicated, but basically it's just taking those positive tests and finding out which strain of coronavirus or COVID-19 it is. Because as most people will know watching this, the Delta variant is absolutely prevalent. But the UK is still particularly concerned about Beta and maybe some of the others as well, maybe Gamma, that's more prevalent in South America. So they want to keep out these other types of viruses, these variants of concern. And so they are demanding that countries do more and more genomic sequencing. And that was almost like a bit of a smokescreen for me at first, because it was a convenient lever with which to say, no, these countries have to stay on red. And among them were both Turkey and Pakistan. But
sorry, but even though, sorry, Tim, there has been no variant of concern from Pakistan or Turkey, and yet still they were left on the red list.
Yeah, exactly. As I was going to say, I think I even strongly criticised a government minister who was claiming that there were variants of concern among passengers arriving and a lot of people infected from Pakistan. Well, that actually wasn't particularly the case. There have been small rises in the latest data since then on the number of people coming into the UK from both Pakistan and from Turkey infected, but not at extremely high levels at all, 2.5% kind of margin. 2% is kind of a threshold to take notice of. But last time we saw Morocco not go red with 6% of people arriving. So there's no clear marker for what should be put on red and what wasn't. And as you've said as well, Mohammed, there were no variants of concern. And the latest genomic sequencing across the whole subcontinent is showing still no other variants other than the ones that the UK has already been hit with, and therefore aren't considered variants of concern anymore. That's the Alpha, which we think was first analysed in England and noticed in England in Kent, some refer to it as the Kent variant, and also Delta, of course, itself, which was first identified in India, that's taking up almost 100% of all cases here in the UK as well now.
Now, how do you see the situation? Lots of questions coming through on WhatsApp now and also on Twitter about the situation in Turkey. Their cases went up massively today. If they were making a decision based on what happened at the weekend, then possibility Turkey might come out of the red list. But if it's based today, then they might think twice. What's your thinking about that?
Well, first and foremost, as you said, we don't exactly know when the decision will be. We don't even know if there will be a decision. There have been some rumours going around that this week's traffic light review, which is promised every 3 weeks and is due tomorrow, as you said, somewhere usually between 5 and 6 p.m, but once it was as late as 10 p.m. Well, that may be delayed. And it may be wrapped in with one mega announcement, if you like, with the new system that I know you want to talk about in a moment. But regarding Turkey in this week, I said that Turkey was in a better position to get off this week and the put onto the amber list simply because it has done an awful lot of genomic sequencing. And the cases were kind of stable. But as you say, in the last few days, they have gone up, particularly today, another really big rise. We're seeing the highest daily case rates, and positivity is back over 8% compared to Pakistan's just under 5%. So Pakistan now looks in a slightly better position than Turkey. But don't judge against each other. You have to judge against the limits. And I think anything under 5% is good. So Turkey is missing that by quite a long way at the moment, but it does have very strict COVID protocols in place inside the country now. Masks on public transport for long distance, vaccination certificates required. Their vaccinations also a lot better than Pakistan. So there's some good for Pakistan and some better for Turkey. And it is impossible to analyse which is the most important and to what degree. But I think the fact that Turkey has uploaded an awful lot of this genomic sequencing that I mentioned, searching for variants, and hasn't found any, does stand it in very good stead. And I would be confident that Turkey will definitely get off red, but may not be this week, particularly in view of the rising cases. The government may have overridden a decision taken by the Joint Biosecurity Committee, say on Monday, and said, hold on a minute, these cases are rising too much. Maybe we should just delay it until the next announcement. But for me, why delay it? If there are no variants, it doesn't matter if cases are rising, if they're all still Delta variant, then there's no, if you're going to make a decision anyway in 2 weeks and thousands of people's lives are adversely affected at the moment, then I think you should go ahead and put both Pakistan and Turkey on amber immediately.
Yeah, and there are reports this week that the review into the traffic light system, which you alluded to at the top of the programme, will see the amber and green list scrapped. We know that Sajid Javid yesterday in the House of Commons more or less confirmed that, as did the Prime Minister in his press conference in Downing Street. What are you hearing about what we may end up with?
Yeah, absolutely. There will no longer be a green and amber from the 1st of October. They might announce that a little bit earlier. I'm being told now it might come in the latter days of September. Some even saying, well, it might come very early next week because this announcement this week may not take place. It's very confusing, but the long and short of it is we will end up at some point in October, probably from the 1st of October, with just two lists, a red list and a fine list. There'll be no green watch list, anything like that. Just a you can go without hotel quarantine or you cannot go without a hotel quarantine. That does make it a lot simpler. And I'm also being told that will be based purely on the risk of variants. So again, the genomic sequencing and make sure you're doing enough is key. And Turkey's doing an awful lot now. Good months for Turkey. Pakistan is still doing nowhere near enough. It is uploading some and many countries are not, but it does need to do more genomic sequencing, find out the variants and share the data. And if anyone listening and watching wants to know how to find out and keep track of that, just type in GISAID, GISAID into Google or any search engine and you'll be able to find the data for yourself.
Yeah. Now, do you think it's right that PCR tests will be scrapped for UK returnees who have been double jabbed as part of this announcement that we're hearing on October the 1st? When, if you've had a vaccination, you can still get COVID. So we potentially might have people coming into the country who are double vaccinated, who are positive, yet we're not going to test them. We're going to let them through.
Well, apparently we're going to antigen test them. That's the rumours coming from the broadsheets and some of the newspapers that tend to get the best leaks from the government. So we do tend to believe them. I think the most important one for the travel industry and also for most British people is knowing that you can get home, whether you're going to visit relatives in a country that you can also call home, or whether you're going on holiday somewhere completely alien where it's costing you a lot of money. And the fear is when you take that test that you need to get back into the UK, what happens if it's positive? You then may have to pay to stay in isolation for 7, 10, 14 days at your own expense before knowing whether you'll test negative to come back again. And that does happen even to double vaccinated people. So I think it's important we get rid of that. Personally, I would keep the day 2 test because, as you said, PCR tests are the only way that we can genomically sequence and keep track of any variants coming into the country. But the rumours are they are going to replace that. It's a populist move, and it looks like we will be only, we come back to the UK, having been abroad, we will only have to do rapid tests, lateral flow tests, if you like, the cheaper version, the antigen test, when we do come back into the UK. For me, I think that might be a mistake. I don't like paying more money for PCR, but I would understand the reasons for it if that was to maintain. Please scrap the test you have to take before you come back to the UK.
We're coming towards the end of our time together. A couple of questions, one from Twitter asking about Bangladesh. Do you know anything about the data coming from Bangladesh?
Yeah, I mean, broadly, it's similar for all the nations in that region. The testing level and the infection level are both very low in Bangladesh. So it looks like cases are really low now, but they had a really bad wave, recently a double wave, really. But the most important thing, again, is no variants. And again, a little bit of genomic sequencing is being done.
Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Don't go anywhere. I'll be waiting. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, live from our studios here in Wakefield, wherever you are around the world. I hope you found the discussion that we had just there with Tim White about the UK Red List and the decision-making behind that. And obviously, I know it's something which is concerning lots of people, not just in Pakistan, but also Egypt and Bangladesh and Turkey. And obviously, we'll keep an eye on that. And as we get that announcement, we expect some sort of indication in the morning, Thursday morning, if that announcement is happening tomorrow or if they're going to postpone it and wait until the announcement towards the end of October. We'll keep an eye on it, as I said. Just follow us on Twitter, British Muslim TV, for the latest information.
So I'm, again, fairly confident that Bangladesh and Pakistan will join India on the non-red list. It may not go to amber this week. There may not even be a decision. But when the whole thing is reformed at the start of October, hopefully there will be free travel available between Pakistan, Bangladesh and the UK.
Yeah, so that your big prediction is that potentially there might not be a decision tomorrow. And if there is an announcement, there won't be much change. It will happen towards the end of September.
Yeah, that's when the major changes will happen for sure. My initial prediction is that there'll be virtually zero movement between green and amber because there's not going to be much point, and really there's not much differentiation between the two, and 80% of the UK is fully vaccinated anyway. But I'm hoping there will be some movement on the red list or movement off the red list. And Turkey, I think, was more likely to benefit from that. And number one nation, another Muslim nation, by the way, Maldives, it must be the safest destination on earth. It's impossible on any of the resort islands to find anywhere indoors to drink or eat. Everything is outdoors, including many of the showers. So how you can not get a safer place than the Maldives, I don't know. But it's still on the list.
Yeah, Tim, because that was the thing I was thinking as well. Pakistan have said that you have to have a PCR test on arrival and exit of the country. They have introduced from the 1st of October, only double vaccinated people can travel into their country internationally. So the government seems to be taking those actions, and yet we don't see the British government recognise the significant barriers that they are putting in place of Pakistan.
Yeah, but that was one of the things I was saying about Turkey as well. They've taken these measures, but they've taken them after not being put on the green or amber list last time. And they did have meetings with the UK government before. They've had other ones since, as you intimated recently, the high-profile one with Pakistan. So the fact that they have now taken on board what the British government demanded, and in particular in Turkey's case, uploaded a whole heaps of data, thousands of genomic sequencing, whereas Pakistan, we're talking about just a handful. Pakistan could do better, but they are going a long way along the road to improving safety protocols, improving immigration and emigration as well with regards to COVID. And they are uploading a few samples. And of course, cases going the right way in Pakistan, which they're not at the moment in Turkey. But fingers crossed, should be good news for both nations and for Bangladesh, hopefully in the near future, but please don't shoot me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. That's a key point. We are broadcasters. We are experts like yourself, Tim. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and always keep an eye tomorrow evening when that announcement comes. But yeah, don't shoot the messenger. It's not our decision. It's a decision being made by the British government, and we'll have to wait and see what that decision is. We expect that announcement tomorrow around 5 or 6 o'clock, but we may get an indication in the morning after this reshuffle and Grant Chap staying in post. Thank you so much, Tim. Great to see you, my friend.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, and good luck to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Tim White, the COVID data expert joining us live there from the Northwest. And then that breaking news tonight, the Prime Minister's been very busy all day. Boris Johnson's been busy all day with his reshuffle. But also tonight, the White House has just confirmed that Boris Johnson will be joining the US President Joe Biden and the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison for an on-camera address at 10 o'clock British summertime. That's just as we come off air. A spokesman for the President of the United States said the three leaders will be making a strategic national security announcement. Can you see the pattern? Identical message there as we saw from Downing Street as well. So we'll keep an eye on that. But let's move on to our next topic. If you want to join the discussion, we're taking your calls now on 01924231083. You can get in touch with us on our social media handle, British Muslim TV. Now, more than 25,000 older black and minority ethnic people live with dementia in the UK, in part due to vascular risk factors such as hypertension, often found in African, Caribbean and South Asian UK populations. Often our communities don't talk about it, and they don't know how they can find the support and how we, as community members, can support sufferers. Shahid Mohammed Sardar works to increase awareness of dementia in BME communities. He's joining us live on British Muslim TV from what I would argue is one of the greatest towns in the UK, Rochdale. But there are other towns available, but they're not as welcoming as my hometown of Rochdale. So, yeah. Shahid, a very warm welcome to the programme. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, salam. How are you, Shafiq?
I'm
Fantastic
good,
introduction. I couldn't agree with you more. Rochdale, it's the #1 town.
Thank you.
Born and brought up in Rochdale. So, yeah, absolutely. We have that definitely in common, don't we, Shafiq? So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me this evening as well.
Absolute honour for us to have you, sir. Firstly, you've seen the figure of BME communities and dementia. Tell us about the data and the impact on sufferers.
Yeah, sure. Just can I give you a bit of a background to myself as to why I got into this particular field very quickly, just a couple of minutes. I had worked in the civil service for over 2 decades in the civil service as a contracts manager. The last part of my career was working at Oldham Council and the British Council in Manchester. And it was during that time when we noticed that my mother's health had started to deteriorate. She was losing her mobility. She was getting very confused. Some of the symptoms which at the time were unknown to us, we just assumed they were perhaps mental health or maybe just the fact that she's getting a little bit older. So I made the decision at that time to give up my employment and I became a full-time carer for my mum. So I shared that role with my wife, and trust me, being a carer is a full-time position. You end up becoming a care coordinator because you have to be almost an expert in every aspect of looking after someone with dementia. In terms of the statistics, absolutely, what you said was absolutely correct. I mean, we expect the numbers of people from BAME backgrounds, Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, particularly South Asian, is expected to grow to, I think, 7 to 8-fold in the next 3 decades. So it's a ticking time bomb. We're going to see a large number of people suffering from this illness, and they suffer because my mum suffered with it awfully. And often the confusion is that it's memory related. It's true for Alzheimer's, for instance, and what you said absolutely correct at the beginning was dementia is an umbrella term. So it kind of describes a series of symptoms that people may suffer with. The most 2 common ones are Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Alzheimer's, you're absolutely right, it affects the memory. Someone with Alzheimer's, their deterioration can be quite sudden, quite quickly. Someone with vascular dementia is more of a staggered decline in their general health. And people from BAME backgrounds are more likely to suffer from vascular dementia because of some of the reasons you mentioned before. Vascular diseases, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, and so on. And it's the only preventable dementia, actually. There's no cure for dementia yet, but there are things that we can do as a society, as individuals, to make sure that we don't get these conditions and it doesn't lead to vascular dementia. It happens when there's a restriction of blood supply of oxygen to the brain, and certain parts of the brain are affected, and that affects an individual's ability to talk, to behave, become incontinent. So we can get into the technicality, but in terms of the data, you're right, it's a growing problem. It's not a mental health issue, and that's something that I have to make absolutely clear.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not depression or anxiety, it's a disease of the brain.
Yeah. And just tell me what your initial reflections, we're about 3 minutes before our next break. So what's your initial reflections on how communities should react to dementia? You've talked powerfully about your own personal experience, but what can we in the community learn from your experience?
Sure. Dementia is still hugely stigmatized, and that kind of goes back to if you go back to the first generation of our elders that arrived from the subcontinent, from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. They left a lot of their elderly relatives back home, and they arrived here relatively on their own, still quite young, so they had no experience of witnessing someone with dementia or acting strange. So now we get to a point where that generation, who are now in their 80s and 90s, now begin to suffer from these illnesses and these symptoms. And we don't know how to react to it as a community, because we see as someone elderly acting odd. We'll use the word, if you're Punjabi, pagal ho gaya, someone's gone a bit crazy, anything but the fact that it could be dementia. The fact that you may be losing some of your faculties doesn't mean that you are suffering from dementia. There could be all sorts of reasons. It could be stress, it could be mild cognitive impairment, and so on. Now, because there's no word for dementia in many South Asian languages, and the fact that my campaign is to normalise the conversation about dementia, use the word to describe the condition, we resort to often quite derogatory terms to describe the person with dementia. So, for instance, they've gone boggle, they've gone crazy, and so on. So we tend to hide it. And we know statistically that South Asian people from BME backgrounds do present late to services or not at all. So they do suffer in silence. And we know this from the work that I've done with carers, that they would rather suffer in silence than go to their GP, who may say, it's nothing to worry about, you're just simply getting old, just go home and Allah Toba, as we were saying in Punjabi, reflect on your faith and do that, rather than treat it how it should be. So we need to normalise this conversation, break that stigma, that taboo, and tell people it's okay to talk about dementia, but also to ask for help. And I don't know whether we have time, but very quickly, what happens often is we would rather go to a faith leader. I
was just going to come. I'm just sorry to interrupt you there, Shad. I really want to give you a bit more time. We've got about 30 seconds to go to the break. What we'll do, just pause there. We'll come back to you and we'll pick that point up, because that's what I think you're reading my mind. That was one of my questions I was going to ask you next. Just after the break, we'll take a break. We'll continue this very important conversation about dementia and BME communities with our special guest from Rochdale, Shahid Mohammed Sardar. Shahid has agreed to take some questions. Please give us a ring. We were just talking just before the break about the fact within sort of South Asian communities, there's the thing about faith healers, black magic, and they try to explain and cover up a dementia diagnosis. Just you were beginning to talk about that. Please share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so this goes back to the fact that the condition is stigmatized and it's massively tabooed, because we other than mental health issues, we don't know of any other condition that would affect the brain, and the way that someone with dementia is affected is the fact that it's a physiological change of the brain. So that, there are parts that affect mobility, speech, and other things as well. So in terms of stigma, yes, we would rather go to, as a community, go to our faith leader. And if it's a good faith leader, he should say, look, if you're worried about your memory, if you're worried about your health condition, you should go and see your GP. And the GP would then refer to the appropriate services. However, if you come across a faith healer, we have no issues with that.
Don't go anywhere. After these very important messages, we'll be back and continue the conversation. Join us on 01924 231 083. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. My special guest is Shahid Mohammed Sardar.
But if it happens to be a charlatan who will say, drink this, do this, give me £500 and I'll sacrifice a buffalo in your name and you'll be fine. With someone with dementia, during that time, if they're doing this course of action from the faith healer, for say 6 months, the person with dementia's health will deteriorate during that time. So what we need to make sure is that people understand what dementia is and go to the right services at the right time. Because if they get into the whole notion of, well, it could be black magic, it could be jaddu, someone's done taveez on you, that's a real worry. I have a quick anecdote. I was doing some training with some police officers in Rochdale, and I mentioned black magic to them. And one of the police sergeants actually stood up and said, "Shahid, I have a question for you. We responded to a domestic incident. We turned up with a size 11s into the house of a South Asian family, presumably Muslim family, but they found an elderly South Asian lady. And the elderly chap that was next to her, presumably her husband, was shouting the word jinn. He kept repeating this word over and over again. And the officers assumed that she'd had a jinn, as in the drink with a G. So they were getting quite concerned at this point. It was only until the son interjected and said, no, my mother's been diagnosed with vascular dementia. However, my father's still insisting that she's possessed by a jinn. And that's why there was this huge confusion from the police. So, until we educate not just our communities, the South Asian families as well, but also professionals, that dementia is a growing issue, it is stigmatized, and we need to normalize that conversation by educating faith leaders and people that have an important part to play in our society.
Now, you've written 2 books. One, the first, let's talk about that, a fragmented pathway experience of the South Asian community and the dementia care pathway supported by Salford Universities. Tell us a bit about what the book is and what you hope to achieve by it.
Yeah, so I wrote this book really as my personal experience taught me many things going through that journey with my mother, looking after my mum who had vascular dementia. I was supported by a lady who was amazing at Salford University, Professor Anya Ahmed. So this book was reflections of our experience from not getting a very good service at the beginning of, pre-diagnosis of dementia right through to end-of-life care. And in between the book, I then talk about my personal experiences of taking mum to hospital, of palliative care, and so on. So it's quite a comprehensive document. It is an academic study as well. It's all a reference. And it was important for me to put this out there because I wanted to educate and hopefully help other families. And for me, I see that as Sadqa Jariyah. If I can help one family, to get the help that they need, then for me, I feel, I'm getting the reward. And it's now become almost my mission to educate people. And through the first book that I wrote, the Fragmented Pathway, I'm doing an updated version of that at the moment. I'm hoping to reach out to professionals so they understand better a background to BAME communities, dementia, culture, stigma, religion, black magic. So all those subjects are covered in there. And to be honest with you, Shafiq, some of these issues are controversial in our communities, and often we get told not to talk about these and cover them up. But it's important, like I said, for me to do this, and it's something that I will do going forward. The second book.
We'll talk about the second if we can in a second. I keep encouraging callers, and my producer tells me off because I never take the calls because I get consumed by our guests. So let's take a call. Let's go to line 1. Assalamu alaikum. You're live on British Muslim TV. Hello, sister.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yasmin. Is that Yasmin? Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, fine. I just wanted to say, see, when it comes to, it's making me think as a Muslim and as culture as well, that have we not got any positive facts for ourselves to have cures? Are we that lack of education that we didn't know this? Are you saying to me as a Muslim, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, they didn't even know about this, so they were uneducated? So whole religion and culture is uneducated. It's a bit shocking. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. Do you want to pick that point up, Shahid?
Yeah, if I may, and I was going to touch on it before we went to the break. So I was talking about the work I'm doing with a particular mosque in Rochdale. I was speaking with the imam in that mosque. And we were talking quite frankly in the fact that there's a higher incident of dementia within BAME communities, South Asian Muslim communities. And he actually told me, and I was educated at that time, that there are verses, quite explicit verses on the Quran. I can't remember them on the top of my head, but they do talk about the fact that once you knew everything, and then you get to a point in your life, when you get a bit older, you will forget everything, and you will become almost dependent on them, almost like childlike. So this, so just to respond to your caller there, absolutely, our faith as Muslims just tell us, it told us 1400 years ago in scripture that these conditions would happen. But unfortunately, because perhaps, we don't read the Quran in other languages, we don't pick up on these sort of things. I wasn't aware of the fact that these verses existed until the Imam educated me and told me. So for me, that was a huge eye-opener. And I think we need to send that message out to, Muslim viewers and people who are watching this program that, we were told about conditions like dementia in our scripture 1400 and 1400 years ago, and research is now telling us now that there will be an increase in dementia, particularly vascular dementia and South Asian BAME communities. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers your viewers' question.
Yeah, please.
We're not saying people are uneducated. We're just saying that there is a lack of awareness, and it's hugely stigmatized. Yeah,
well, thank you so much, Yasmin, as ever, for your call. If you want to join the discussion, 01924231083 is our number. And let's talk about our second book. It's a bilingual collection of dementia family carers' reflections, experiences, and poetry during the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown. It's titled, should I say, We Are Together. Wow, what a powerful title, because we like to think we're all in this together, but is that the reality?
Well, absolutely. We are together, and we saw as a society, we did bind together really, really well during lockdown. We had the clap for the NHS, for our carers during that time. So we did definitely pull together. But one thing that we almost kind of neglect to appreciate is the work of unpaid family carers. We have the paid carers, but these people who I was in touch with during lockdown were struggling just to get basic supplies, Shafiq. They were struggling to get out and get things like incontinence pads or supplies for the person that they're caring for because of lockdown. Non-essential shops were closed. The town that I'm from, that you're from, there's a large stock of terraced houses. We're not blessed, many families, with large gardens, so they weren't able to wander out into the garden and have a bit of a stroll and kind of take it easy. Families were stuck with young children at home, looking after someone with dementia, plus their family, their young children, perhaps. So the book was inspired by their thoughts and how they felt during that time, during the fact that we were, locked in. We hope, and the question mark after, we are together, really is a question to society. Were we all together? Were we looking after people who are struggling at home? How do we acknowledge the fact that perhaps they do need something? So people got together. I worked with a chap called Dr. Abdul Shakur, who supports people with dementia in Rochdale and in Oldham, and this book was really a reflection of their thoughts, poetry as well. So this is something that we pulled together. It was an effort. It was a joint effort, but I think we captured people's thoughts during that time really, really well. I hope you had a. Did you read some of the poetry in there?
I did indeed, and it was a really powerful collection, and I would really encourage people. If we can share a link through our social media, I'm happy to do that. And we've just got one more caller that I want to include before we got finished in the next 3 minutes. 3 minutes, wow. Time is flying when you're being educated. Let's go to the lines. Let's see who's on line 2. Assalamu alaikum, you're live on British Muslim TV. Hello, caller, you're live. Brother. Okay. Well, yeah, apologies. We just don't like to interrupt our guest mid-sentence. So if you do want to ring us on 01924231083, just be a bit patient. I've got so many questions I want to really ask you, Shahid. I hope you can come back and we can do more of a detailed discussion around this. But
yeah, definitely.
We know that
I'd love to come back.
There is no word within sort of Urdu, Punjabi, Mipri that describes and translates dementia. Is that why it's more challenging to discuss and overcome?
Definitely. I think I alluded to it earlier that there is no word for dementia. Often when people used to translate dementia, they used to use things like, or use words like bhulne ki bimari, for instance, forgetfulness. But as I said before, someone with vascular dementia may not be suffering from memory loss at an early stage, but someone with Alzheimer's may. So it's not an accurate translation. So my point is, why call it something else? Let's call it what it is. It is dementia, and dementia describes those symptoms. But someone with vascular dementia may present slightly different to someone with Alzheimer's disease, for instance. And that definitely is a barrier for people to fully understand exactly what it is. And I'm sure you may come across individuals who may make light of someone with dementia. They may say, "Oh well, you're late to a meeting, Shafiq or Shahid. or you may be suffering from dementia. And I think we have to challenge that behaviour and that language and that narrative from often quite responsible people in our community, because dementia is a deterioration of the brain where the brain cells are dying. So why would you make light of it? But call it what it is. Dementia is a disease of the brain that couldn't affect anyone, even someone in their 40s. So you have something called young onset dementia. We come across families who are devastated by this disease. So, yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We are getting there. I am raising awareness as much as I can, but we need more people like yourself who are in prominent positions to propagate the message.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really sorry that we've run out of time. I promise you, if you're up for coming back, we can do more of this, because I think, as you said, it's very important that we address these issues in our communities. Keep safe. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shahid. Take care.
And look forward to seeing you sometime soon. Yes. Anyway, we're obviously covering the reshuffle, the red list, as you know. Now, let's move on to our final guest. Yasmin Rahman is a British Muslim born and raised in Hertfordshire. As a child, she wanted to be a postwoman, but decided to settle for being an author. She has an MA in creative writing from the University of Hertfordshire and also an MA in writing for young people from Bath Spa University, both with distinctions. So a very clever lady. Her short story, Fortune Favours the Bold, was published in Stripes and anthology. A Change is going to come in 2017, with the bookseller awarding the contributors a YA Book Prize Special Achievement Award in 2018 for commitment to making. And after the break, we talk to the award-winning author Yasmin Rahman, who will be joining us to talk about her latest book. You don't want to miss that discussion. We'll be taking your calls as well on 01924 231 083. We'll take a very quick break and then we'll carry on the discussion. Join us on the other side of this. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV, wherever you are around the world. A very warm welcome. I hope you found our two very important topics, one on the red list, but also there just on dementia and BME communities. And I often get the urge to say that we should expand our interviews, but yeah, Shahid has agreed to come back and do a longer version of the work that he does, but very inspiring work going on there by Shahid. Now, as I said, we're live from our studios here in Wakefield. YA Publishing More Inclusive. Her latest book is titled This Is My Truth. Welcome to the program, Yasmin. A really important conversation we're having. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me on.
I'm really excited. Now, let's pick up on that description. You always wanted to be a postwoman. What went wrong?
I always forget that's in my bio and everyone picks up on it. I was just obsessed with the idea that I could read people's mail. I know that's obviously not how it goes, but that's what the thing was. I just loved words. And to me, that was just like a little sneaky thing that I could do. And it really fascinated me.
Yeah.
Obviously, it did not work out.
Yeah, it didn't work out because you kind of grew out of it, or you realised that there was a higher calling, if you like.
I mean, I realised that what I wanted to do was illegal, but also, yes, writing books is more my speed. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, just as you're British born, you're a proud Muslim, alhamdulillah, you wear the hijab. Tell us about your upbringing.
Yes, so I was born in England, and I've lived in the same town since I was born. It's a very, very white county, so I grew up as the only brown person in my entire school for a lot of it. So it's very much, I call myself a coconut because I'm that brown on the outside, white on the inside, because you grow up with all the white influences coming at you. So it was only really sort of by my own volition that I went looking for representation that I could relate to. So, books with characters like me in it, because, there's such a lack of that in publishing in general, but especially for teenagers. So I grew up, my parents are from Bangladesh, they came over here just before I was born. So I've been brought up with that cultural background as well. which I always felt it's sort of at odds with what I wanted to do. You know, you think of the cultural stereotypes of you must be a doctor or an accountant or something like that, and I wanted to be a writer, which no one we know in our community has done. So it was sort of me sort of pushing back against what I thought my parents wanted of me. But alhamdulillah, they are very proud of me now and very supportive.
Yeah, and where did that interest in writing come and reading books?
I honestly don't know. I think I didn't really grow up around books. I only really got into it when I was in university. I did my undergrad degree in English literature, and they said I could minor in 2 other subjects. So I did creative writing as one of them, and one of the modules was about reading children's literature. And obviously I hadn't read much as a kid. And so these were the first time that I was reading these books, whereas everyone else was like, oh, I remember this from my childhood. And I'm just sitting there like, I don't know what's going on. But they just spoke to me. It was sort of an epiphany kind of thing of, I really like these books. I feel seen by these books and I really love them. And I just fell completely in love and read and read and read. And yeah, there's always been something inside me that's wanted to write.
Yeah, and you did an MA in creative writing. How important is it for Muslim women and Muslim men to do these courses? Because like you said, because traditionally it's be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an engineer, you know what I mean, get into business or do something like that. But to become a writer?
It's not important at all. I think I know lots of people who are writers who have backgrounds in, you know, engineering or economics or accounting. You know, it does not matter what your background is. You don't need to even have a degree. You just have to have that passion for telling stories and knowledge of, you know, the structure of books and things like that, and be willing to work on your writing. And that's all that matters. I think I just did my MAs because I wanted to be a student forever. And my mum was trying to get me married. So I was like, if I just keep doing master's degrees, she won't marry me off.
Yeah, and then you got a distinction in both courses. What did you learn about yourself during this period?
I think it's interesting because the first master's degree I did, I was writing about white characters because I thought that's all that would get published. So I wrote about, you know, teenagers doing drugs and having sex and all this stuff. And that's not my experience. That's not something I relate to at all. But I thought that's what I needed to write to get a book published and book on the shelves, which was my dream. And so I left that first master's degree with a book, and I sent it out and no one wanted it because it was quite terrible. So the second one is where I really came into myself, I think. I took a gap between them, and it was me sort of figuring out whether I really wanted to do this as a career and whether this risk was worth it, or whether I should just, you know, give myself up to an office job. So I realised that what I want to do as a Muslim woman is let people be seen in books. I grew up not seeing myself in books, so I really want to change that and show, you know, young Muslim teenagers that they can be protagonists of books and they can see themselves in books.
And where did the idea, as you wrote your first book, come from? Was that based on instinct, or was that something which you developed over a number of years?
Yeah, so my first book was called All the Things We Never Said, just you can see on the background there as well. So that was a book about mental health, and that was quite a personal book that had been building inside me for many years. You know, I'm very open about my struggles with my own mental health, and when I was suffering as a teenager, I found myself reflected in books. So I'd read books about mental health and I'd completely, you know, relate to what was going on. But the thing was that all these characters were white. None of them had the added layer of culture or religion on it that I felt struggling with, kind of thing. So I wanted to correct that. And I know that there's, you know, such a problem with mental health as in Muslim teenagers these days. So I want to have that shown, to have that extra layer, because it does make a difference.
Yeah, and then you were talking just a bit about the fact that, you know, the stories are different, but some authors, I was talking to a couple last week who was saying they kind of pitch their story in their book around their own personal experiences. You didn't do that. Was that a deliberate approach?
I mean, I don't think my life is interesting enough to build a book around it.
I think it is. I've just been interviewing you for, what, I don't know how many, 10 minutes or so, and I'd be fascinated by your
I always say that there's a part of me in all the characters that I write. So there's a part of my personality in all the books, but I don't think I'd be able to again, I genuinely do think I'm a very boring person, so I don't think a book about my life would be interesting at all.
Yeah, a really important point there. If you want to ask Yasmin a question, 01924 231 083. She's here till the end of the program. So lots more questions around this. And when you look around, Yasmin, you look at the people, your peers, who are predominantly white, they're middle class, they're, you know, affluent people from working class backgrounds, and, you know, Muslim women generally are not represented in this field of work.
Absolutely, yes. I think I'm quite lucky in that the children's market, children's publishing is thankfully a lot better than the adults. So I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by people who are, I want to say, a bit more down to earth, but I feel like that's offensive to adult writers. But there are plenty of, you know, people of color who are writing books. You know, I personally know a lot, and I can see that there's more emerging, you know, to get their books out soon. But there is, I think the main problem is that the people who work in publishing, the editors and the publishers, are the ones who are all white and affluent. So the books that get through to the stage of being published aren't always ours, because these people can't relate to it and don't see it as a good story, in effect.
Yeah, and as I said, we're coming, I think, shortly to our break. We're about 3-4 minutes away. 3 minutes before our final break, and then the final countdown of the end of the program. So, Yasmin, who else out of the writers inspires you when you look at, I don't know, the prizes and you see the books that have been written, the awards that have been given to authors? Who do you look up to as a writer?
I feel like you won't know any of them. They're very obscure writers. I am, you know, I'm 30 years old, but I still read books for teenagers because that's what I write and that's what I like. I'm not so much inspired by writers, but it's more about the types of books. So I really like books that tackle dark themes. So that's something that I like to do over my books, is tackle hard-hitting things that I think need to be spoken about more. So I really like books about mental health and, you know, death and very dark things, because I think that's the kind of stuff that people are scared to talk about in real life. But books are such a great way to open conversations, and for anyone who is struggling with these topics, who feel that they can't talk about it, can read a book and get some help from that, or feel seen from that, and that helps a lot. Yeah,
well, we're coming back 2 minutes. I've got one question coming through WhatsApp as well. Number is on the screen, 07585 835150. I should know this number by heart because I say it every week. Anyway, so it says, Salam Yasmin, I would like to ask, how did you manage to get published? And what was the process like, going from having a story idea to writing it to actually getting published?
Yeah, that's a very good question. With my first book, I was doing my master's degree. So I wrote part of my first book as my dissertation for that master's degree. And then I graduated and I finished that book, and I sent it to all my friends and asked them to read it and tell me what I should change, if there was anything wrong with it. And then the process is that you look for a literary agent. So that is someone who deals with all the business side of things, so you don't have to do anything. They get a share of the money that you get, but it's very important to have that. They'll help you develop your book and edit it and come up with new ideas. So after I left my course, I finished the book, I sent it out to some agents. I got quite a lot of offers, which was lovely and very rare. And then what happens is your agent will take it to publishers and editors who they think will be a good fit. So they know the entire industry and all these people and have connections. So they'll pitch it to them and the publisher will make you an offer, which is what happened. And then months and months and months later, it comes out and it's on the shelf.
Yeah. And that must be an amazing experience to be able to go to a bookshelf and see your book.
Yes,
on display.
Amazing. Yeah, it's still like, I still go looking for it every time I'm in a bookshop.
I know. Let's open the lines and take some of your calls. 01924 231 083 is our number. Now, tell us about the book titled Fortune Favours the Bold, which you were talking about before. Were you surprised by the success of the book?
Fortune Favours the Bold was a short story that I had published. My first one was All the Things We Never Said. I'm assuming you mean this one?
Yeah, I think you were first published in this. That was the sort of that was the first one, wasn't it? And then you had your book that you just keep showing us.
So Fortune Favours the Bold was a short story that I wrote and entered a competition.
Well, stay there. I know you're not going anywhere. I know I'm not going anywhere. We're going to take our final break. And then when we come back, we'll continue our fascinating conversation with the award-winning writer, Yasmin Rahman. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV, the final segment. Wow.
That was run by a publisher called Stripes. They were making an anthology written solely by writers of colour. And the theme that we were given, I have forgotten what it was. That's really terrible.
Yeah, but the thing I wanted to ask you about was the fact that you got an award for this because they were so impressed with it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I didn't get the award. It was more the publisher that got it, but I can claim that, you know.
You can absolutely claim a share of that joy.
Yes, so that was amazing. It was a real effort to sort of get more voices by people of colour out there, which, you know, the industry really does need. And they got, you know, an intern who was of colour as well to work on it, and an illustrator who was a person of colour. So it was a real effort to increase diversity within the field, which is why they got the award, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and then we've got, let's take a call. Sister Yasmin's on the line. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Yasmin.
Assalamu alaikum, Mohammed and Yasmin. Yasmin, I wanted to ask you, what's your favourite book that you've written? And I also wanted to say that when I was at school, my teacher used to read books to me and I didn't even know much English, so I respect all my teachers that taught me how to even speak English, which is great to have literature. Anyway, Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Yasmin.
No, thank you for that question.
Which was your favourite book then, Yasmin?
I mean, I've only got two, so it's a bit of this is absolutely my favourite book that I've written. It was, you know, it's my first book and I'm always going to have a soft spot for it. I think it's also because it was a book that I'd been wanting to write for such a long time and it meant so much to me. Whereas once you've got a publishing deal, you're sort of under pressure from your publisher to keep churning out books, and so you don't get as much time to think about things or, you know, take as much time as you would like to with the books. Yeah. So that one will always have a special space in my heart.
And then when you look at your family, I mean, let's be honest, Bengali, Pakistani, Indian, sort of Asian families, if you like, can be quite judgmental when it comes to choosing to be an author rather than a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. What's the reaction been from your family to your success?
It's been interesting because I have to be careful because I know they're watching, but I always sort of suspected that they wouldn't be proud of it, that they'd think it was weird because it's, you know, no one we know has done it, no one, you know, you see has done it kind of thing with our background. But when I went ahead and I did it anyway, and they were so proud, and it really shocked me because I had just expected the opposite. So, you know, my parents always ask, you know, how's it going? And they came to my book launch party. They're, you know, always very interested in what's going on and what I'm doing. So it's, you know, it's really, really nice, and they're very supportive.
Yeah, we've got another question. Like I said, the lines are still open, 01924231083. Well, lots of people are really inspired by your interview tonight. Honestly, we're getting lots of questions. Let me see if I can give you some more. There's one here. Salam Yasmin, coming from a very traditional family also, what advice would you give to someone not wanting to do a stereotypical job?
I mean, my advice is to just do it anyway. I'm a very bad example in that I do things behind my parents' back because I'm so passionate about it. So my second master's degree was done in secret. I would leave in the morning and drive up to Bath and pretend I was working because I was that passionate about doing it, kind of thing. And I think the thing is that it's, again, in my situation, I thought that they would judge me, that they wouldn't be impressed, you know, that they wouldn't be proud of me, but they proved me wrong. So I think it's that thing of follow your passion, and your family will see how much it means to you, and they will be supportive because they're your family and they love you and they can see that it's making you happy.
Well, let's talk about the latest book. It's titled This Is My Truth. Tell us about that book.
Yes, so this is my truth. Very lovely cover here. It's about a 16-year-old girl called Amani, who is a British Muslim of Bangladeshi descent, like myself. So she has been hiding a huge secret in that her father is abusive towards her mother. And it's the last days of school, and a blog starts up that starts revealing student secrets. And she is worried that this blog is going to reveal the secret about her father being abusive, and that they'll split her and her brother up, and they'll ruin her family and everything. I really wanted to get across the sort of lack of discussion in our community about domestic abuse, you know, and how it's almost seen as accepted by a lot of people, and the way that we just brush it under the carpet, don't talk about it, and sort of place that as if that's Islamically true when it's very much just culture. And I wanted to show that there's nothing that says in the Quran that you should stay in an abusive marriage kind of thing, and that we need to talk about this more.
Yeah, really powerful story. Again, what's the reaction? Because something which I try to do here at British Muslim TV, and we do as a channel, is try to talk about those taboo topics that you said that don't often get talked about. We talked about dementia just before the break. How important is it that we open up and have those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just the only way to move forward really is to have those conversations and open up different ways to have conversations. So I've had feedback from people who have been through, you know, similar situations, who felt their experience was shown truly within the book, and that made them feel less alone. Specifically with my first book, which was about mental health, which again is another taboo subject in our culture, I had so many teenagers reach out to me to say that the book helped them talk to someone about their mental health and, you know, the problems that they were having. And that's genuinely the best part of doing this job, is to make that impact, to make people see that they're not alone and that they can go and get help. So the response to both books has been amazing. And I think the main thing is just that people are seeing themselves reflected in books. So I grew up with no books to see, you know, Muslim girls in, unless they were, you know, being forced to wear the hijab or being a terrorist, you know. So to have books where we're normal people is so necessary, and that's what I want to do with my career.
Well, that's a really powerful story. Now, if you have been moved by this or you need some additional support or help, you can log on to our support page, britishmuslim.tv/support is where you can find all information about the opportunities, mental health services, and where you can get additional help. Because the important thing is to speak. There's lots of people out there willing to help, wanting to help, and we should reach out and help and support each other. Now, let's talk about what do you do to relax and switch off from writing, or are you one of those people who continuously switch off but still doing writing?
I'm 2 weeks behind on my deadline, so I'm not the type to relax by writing. I am a huge fan of Netflix. I just, you know, binge watch all the things on Netflix and just on my phone. I think specifically with the pandemic, you know, it's been really hard to concentrate on doing any type of work, most of all writing, you know, so it is very much just days of just watching Netflix and being on my phone or sleeping.
Because I found when the pandemic started and I started to do my programs here on British Muslim TV, I found this was kind of a release for me, coming here to the studio in Wakefield and doing the program, because the rest of the week I was kind of, you know, locked at home like everybody else was.
Yeah, I guess the thing about writing is that I'm in my room doing it, kind of thing. So it's still inside your head. And I think it's also, you know, when you're writing about hard things, it's sort of hard to focus on that when there's so many horrible things going on around you, and, you know, people you know who have COVID, or people, you know, the daily death rates that were being told to us, kind of thing. Personally, for me anyway, I found it very hard to concentrate. Yeah,
it can be really, really tough. And how is the family coped during the pandemic? How's that relationship been maintained?
Yeah, I think I always say that our lives generally haven't changed much because of COVID. We're not the type to really go out much anyway, so we're all just staying at home. We did all get COVID just around Christmas time, I think, but, you know, alhamdulillah, it was mild cases and we've all been vaccinated and, you know, just keeping safe.
Now, we've got about a minute left, so let me ask you my final question. When can we expect a third book, Sister Yasmin, and what does the future hold for you?
Oh, well, I mean, who knows? So
you're 2 weeks behind in the deadline, so we do know something's in the pipeline.
I hope my editor is not watching. My next book is due out hopefully next year. I don't know specifically when. I'm writing it at the moment. It is making progress. It's about mental health again, but also about sort of the pressures that are put on children of immigrants. So that thing of growing up and having to be an adult as a child kind of thing because your parents are immigrants kind of thing, and that's something that I haven't seen discussed in books before. Hopefully after that there'll be more books. Any topics that anyone wants written about in books, please do tell me. I'm running out of ideas.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really fascinating conversation. I've been really inspired by you, and you've done an absolutely great job. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you
back.
so much for having me on.
And I hope when that book's done and you get back on track with your time, with your deadline, that you'll come back and tell us all about it.
Will do, absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
you so much there to Yasmin Rahman, the author and writer, joining us from Hertfordshire. We reached the end of the programme, so as we do always at the end, we want to thank our special guests, Tim White, Shahid Mohammed Sardar and Yasmin Rahman, who you were just hearing there. And next week, next week we have an exclusive in-depth interview with Yvonne Ridley, the journalist and broadcaster, about her career, time she spent in captivity in Afghanistan by the Taliban, and her services for the Muslim community here in the UK. We then head to New York and speak to one of America's most important Arab activists, Rabia al-Daibani, about her activist work, but also to reflect on the September the 11th 20th anniversary that happened on Saturday, and the impact the war on terror and the security state that we live in now, have done for the last 20 years. What impact did that have on American Muslims? So that's a really packed show next week as well. And as I said, if you've got any ideas for guests, if you want to share your thoughts with us, you can get in touch with us at British Muslim TV on social media. Thank you so much to everyone behind the scenes, particularly Annabelle, James and Hafiz Usman, for all the work that they do. But to you at home, keep yourself and your family safe. Thank you so much for blessing us and picking British Muslim TV as the home of the TV that you watch. Wherever you are around the world, please take care, and I'll see you very soon. Same time next week, 8:30. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.